Oh, we're in trouble.
Well, I'd like to thank everybody for taking some time to work with us today. Bertha's going to share a little bit about working with nonprofits. So with that, I'm going to give it to you, Bertha.
Okay, can everyone see that screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, so good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon, Bertha.
We are now at What's Next. Hi, Arnie. What's Next, the New Normal Nonprofits. So Trusted Advisors Network Learning Lab. Okay, so I figured I'd start their usual way. We're going to define what nonprofits are. They mean different things to different people. This is a dictionary.com definition. They say not established for the purpose of making a profit, entered into for money, a nonprofit organization, institution, corporation, or other entity. My favorite's this one from the National Council of Nonprofits. A charitable nonprofit that embodies the best of America. They provide a way for people to work together for the common good, transforming shared beliefs and hopes into action. So 1.3 million charitable nonprofits in America. They feed, heal, shelter, educate, inspire, enlighten, and nurture people of every age, gender, race, and socioeconomic status, from coast to coast, border to border, and beyond, right? They foster civic engagement and leadership, drive economic growth, and strengthen the fabric of our communities every single day. So how about today during COVID-19? Some people use these two terms interchangeably, nonprofit and tax exempt, and nonprofit means different things to different people. So I'd like to ask the group today, what does nonprofit mean to you?
It's not where I want my business.
You said it's not what you want for business? Is that what you said?
I was joking. It's not where I want my business to be, make a profit.
Yes. Anyone else, or did we clear the definition?
It means opportunity, Bertha.
It means opportunity?
Yes.
Okay,
it's an organization that needs what we do.
Yes, they do. And we're going to get to that. Yes, absolutely.
But I am with Lorraine that I used to have one of those. You know.
Well, it is a business, and I think that's a part that people tend to forget, is that nonprofits are simply a business with a special tax status.
And good segue, Rick. Yes. So there are different.
They have an important mission. That's for the betterment of others.
Exactly.
Yeah. They have a cause.
Also, for people who are in the for-profit world, they don't understand that if an organization is a nonprofit, that it can, quote unquote, make money. You know, they think that it really needs to operate on a money in, money out basis, and that they can't realize a, let's call it, profit at any point in their existence, which is totally not true.
Correct.
Well, nonprofits don't generally have shareholders. Be that business owners per se, but shareholders.
The stakeholders instead of shareholders.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
But the one thing you've got up here now, Bertha, is that there are 36 types of tax-exempt organizations. You know, there are, I think probably if you looked at the tax code, there are so many tax-exempt organizations that most people would not consider to be nonprofits.
Right. Exactly. So I have listed just a few examples. So 501c3, I think that's the most common one. When you mention nonprofit, most people know 501c3. And those are the public charities. Charitable nonprofits or private foundations. They also fall into that tax code considered churches and religious organizations. Then there are some under 501c4, as it's listed here, homeowners associations, volunteer fire companies, social welfare organizations. Labor unions fall under C5. Chambers of commerce that many of us partner with, right? They're C6. And some childcare organizations are 501k. So back to all of your points and Rick's first point, meaning that it is a business. They do have end clients, end users that they need to support, a vision and a mission that they're pushing forward. So they do have to earn some kind of profit, not in the way that we think of it, but in terms of how do they keep their business moving forward? How do they achieve their vision and their mission for those that they serve? So what do you think? What's the impact, if any, on the nonprofits from COVID-19?
It depends on what the nature of the nonprofit was, but for many of them, the need for them increased profoundly. I mean, if they serviced populations of people who lost their jobs, you know, are on the street, don't have enough to eat, and so forth and so forth. So the scope of their mission went up many-fold. Some others may actually be on the sideline because it was not perceived as critical at this time.
Many of those with a critical mission are not receiving the donations. The ones that I work with are not receiving the donations that they need to do that critical work, which, you know, as she said, the need has grown even stronger. But we're able to help as generously.
Yeah, I think those that relied on fundraising events versus fundraising strategies are sucking wind because a lot of the events got canceled. So, you know, they've had to do a quick turn, you know, and figure something out instead of. And so they do have that, and unfortunately, some were still out there that put all their eggs in one or two major event baskets. And when that event goes away, they really are kind of deer in the headlight, stuck.
It's very interesting. I was listening to something on TV this morning, and they were talking about, you know, what things are going to look like kind of on the other side. And in the nonprofit world, it's interesting. There's a gal by the name of Gail Perry who does a lot of work in North Carolina. I don't know how nationally she's known, but she's one of the nonprofit gurus and does a lot of work within nonprofits, et cetera, et cetera. And for years, literally years, she has been saying to nonprofits, do not rely on events to fund your organization, because events of themselves are labor intensive and the return on investment is not big. Well, I think what happened with the pandemic is that statement became more important than ever. So organizations that I think shifted away from their reliance on events, fundraising events, and look to other areas to raise their funds are doing a lot better than those that totally relied on events.
Excellent.
I can, and you know, what I see happening is all of those nonprofits that rely on events, guess what? They're rescheduling those events to October, November, and December. Do you think that any business who usually contributes to those events is going to be inundated with requests for funds during those months? It's just going to be shocking.
Well, they already are, Bob. You know,
Yeah.
I mean, that's a normal high point for end of year funding anyway, right before the holidays. So
You know,
you're right.
Think of those organizations that made down here who ran a golf tournament in the summer,
Right.
who are now going to try to run it in November. That's just mounts more on top of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and then
And the
there
other
are
thing-
also the nonprofits whose basic business, what they do, it's particularly arts organizations, music, dance, theater, and whatever, their entire existence is based on events, if you will, the performance. And they're the ones who have been decimated by not being able to do much other than some, you know, getting artists together to perform free on Zoom. So they have huge financial holes, because that was, other than, I mean, it was the ticket sales type thing. which they have really lost out and are going to struggle to recoup.
Okay. Anyone else?
You know, I just, we're working with an organization in Wilmington that has several government contracts. Their prime government contracts is doing the groundwork at Camp Lejeune. It's very profitable for that reason. So they've always had a very comfortable income source, but part of their work is working with people who have disabilities, and they do that, people with mental disabilities or behavioral disabilities who require coaching and in some cases one-on-one involvement. Those are funded through through state agencies, and now because of the shutdown, they don't have those people coming into their shop or into their office to work with them. And they've lost like $75,000 a month of income just because of that. And now they're trying to bring those folks back just like you would in any business. And they're not going to recover this year, but hopefully they'll get back to some sort of stability, in the next 6 months.
Okay. Anyone else? Okay, well, most of you said this. You've mentioned these, they feed, they heal, they shelter, educate, inspire, enlighten, and nurture people. So they're hurting in a lot of different ways. So limited understanding of virtual working environments, that's what I have found to be one of the biggest for the nonprofits that I've been working with. How do they still communicate with their teams if they can't be physically together? How do we even plan if we did have an event? What's the workaround? So they had to figure out quickly how to get on Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meet so that they can communicate what the next step is. Those were the ones that were trying to plan the next step. Also, if they're trying to offer a program, well, we still want to be visible and stay top of mind in the community. So let's still continue to offer what we can to the public online, like here in Somerset, the Somerset County Public Library System. They had to make a big shift, and we can't go to the library, so what can we offer? Let's offer more online availability. So where there was a limited participation for some of the cities or towns in the county, they've opened that up now countywide. If you need a quick library card, now they have a huge button. You just go to the homepage, and now their end user can go on and get a library card, a digital library card. They've extended, there are no due dates and no fines. So they're trying to make it easier for their public. And staying top of mind in the community. If you had an event in May, similar to the group that I was working with or speaking to with Habitat for Humanity, they had Women's Build in May. They wanted to cancel it. And one of the suggestions was, well, why do you want to cancel? Don't you want to stay top of mind and still get to what you need for this, your end goal? Why don't you have what you would have had in person in a revised way, in a limited way, but still having the impact online? So spotlight your family, spotlight maybe one of your sponsors, your major donors, and also your volunteers. So stay top of mind. Now, because of social distancing, the volunteering aspect is limited and impacted. We all have to go online. That's the only other way in staying and communicating still with your public. And those nonprofits that work with schools and other organizations that may be closed, what do you do now? What's the plan? And of course, I think as one of you mentioned, safety protocols, prevent physical donations of food, clothing, toys, etc. So what is the workaround? How else can you do that? When do you plan that? Bob mentioned, well, maybe pushing it out, to winter. That might not be the case for some, but some have to plan. How does that impact who we need to help now? And some are still collecting donations, just sticking to the safety protocols of social distancing, making sure they have their PPE, and doing what they need to do for their communities. And then some donors, of course, are personally, financially impacted. They're furloughed, there's illness, childcare, etc. So there's a whole, a huge view of how you can look at this in terms of helping. Now, is there fundraising now? Can there be fundraising now? So I'm going to ask Lauren to jump in.
Hi, everyone. Some of you know I was a professional fundraiser before I added in the incredible opportunity to coach and still do fundraising projects. We came across two articles. The first one, I like how Bertha, the dreary headline. So let me just share with you. This was a survey that was taken initially the end of March and then resurveyed at the end of the first week in May. They contacted 880 charities across 120 countries. 95% of nonprofits globally say they have been negatively impacted by COVID-19. 13% forced to suspend operations. 72% saw a drop in fundraising revenue. Almost 40% in each of these cases reported disruptions in staffing, operations, and nearly 40% said their costs had increased. 50% anticipate a drop of at least 21% in fundraising revenue over 12 months. However, 6% think it will increase. Two strategies employed most to manage the impact of the virus, reducing operating costs and creating new fundraising campaigns. We've talked a little bit about that today. But then we saw another article, and I really wanted to focus on this. Only 1 in 5 donors plan to stop giving until the economy recovers. So that means that 80% of people, 50% of the donors contacted, and this was a large swath across the nation, said they will continue to give, but perhaps give more carefully. 30% said they would give more. I'm sorry, that's not true. 50% said they would give the same. 20% said they would give more. And then 25% said they would give a little bit less during the entire year of 2020. So this prompted me to tell Bertha about an experience I had. I was serving a large Manhattan church in 2001 that I was their on-staff professional fundraiser for a very large capital campaign. 9/11 came, their governing body decided to close off the campaign, and we literally did nothing for 6 months because the church felt it had other priorities, other things more important. Then decided to resume the campaign. That first year, we met very aggressive fundraising goals. We raised 25% of our goal. We raised over $7 million. It was done primarily with major gifts donors. There were a couple $1 million givers in there, but what we found is that people wanted to give. And I know some of us, I don't know how many of the people on this call actually would consult for the fundraising aspect of the nonprofit they work with, but you're around it. I mean, heavens, the fundraising sometimes pays our consultancy fees for whatever we do, whether it's board or leadership development. I would just say, encourage your nonprofit leaders to not be afraid to ask now.
Excellent. Thank you, Lauren. Anyone else would like to comment or share their experience?
Well,
go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up on what Lauren said. I've seen increased giving primarily, I've been involved in Rotary, and I've seen increased giving for things like for food drives, for distributions of food, those types of things. People who before would give $5 are now given $25, and our fundraising is going very, very well, even though we're not going to have our golf tournament this year. But people are taking it out of their pockets because they see the need.
Yeah, and I think I've had a couple that we've gotten into the specifics of how to message the fact that donations are still needed, right? I mean, but these are these are not episodic or event-driven nonprofits. These are ones that have a fundraising strategy that goes throughout the year. And so, but there was some concern that would they come across as being tone deaf, or would they come across as being, not paying attention to the trials and tribulations, as you said on the previous slide, people's personal income. I said, well, it depends on how you message it. It doesn't change your value proposition. Maybe it just changes how you communicate that value proposition. And in both cases, it landed on now more than ever. So that was really the underlying tone. Now more than ever, we need. The good news is, unlike the recession, the stock market has at least stayed fairly decent, because that's where a lot of the discretionary income comes from for a lot of these people that donate, is from these side accounts. They typically don't give out of the day-to-day budget. They give out of some discretionary account that they have to do charitable giving.
I actually have a question for whoever on the call would like to chime in. Just a thought that ran through my brain. There are so many nonprofits who do so much good work. Has there been an effort to interject into your fundraising efforts at this time to say, how do I put this? If we didn't do what we do, what would then be the cause and effect on the general population? In other words, if if the Good Shepherd Ministry, which is a homeless shelter, if that doesn't have enough money to exist and do its thing, what's the result of that? And how does it impact your community, the economy of your area, et cetera? And I don't know, has anybody kind of gone down that road?
Actually, I go down that road with every single nonprofit I work with, because one of the things that nonprofits are still transitioning out of is, hey, look at, and I pick on food banks because I've worked with 4 different ones. Look at all the food we gave, and they have all sorts of great metrics about how much food they gave. But in one case, I also happened to work with a community coalition that was on the receiving end of that, and a third of it got thrown away. So,
oh my gosh. So
the thing, well, it didn't meet, either spoiled, or it didn't meet cultural diets, or, there's a lot of different reasons why that happened. But the fact of the matter is that they were measuring activity. They weren't measuring impact. And so that I've used that question, Linda, and not just because of the pandemic. I think it's a question that they all have to answer. So yeah, I think it's a great point that you bring up.
And this doesn't exactly address it. I don't know if you can see this photo of my virtual background, kind of making me a ghost, but my husband just brought me my mail. And I belong to a group called the ARCS Foundation, which is Achievement Rewards for College Scientists. We had a whole big fundraising event that was supposed to happen in May. There was the sensitivity to, we shouldn't be asking for people for money right now. But this organization raises funds for research for the country's most brilliant scholars. So like Neil deGrasse Tyson is one of our scholars. And the president of the director of the NIH was going to receive our Eagle Award this year. So what this letter is that I just got is basically tying in our mission to how it can help resolve the problem of the pandemic. And I'm thinking that other organizations can tie in the urgency of maybe the problems that the pandemic is causing their client population. So this is to come up with a vaccine or whatever medically. But it just seems like the ones that are still asking are trying to make their, mission relevant, and that the need to give is even more urgent than the uncertainty and the decreased income that those who can still give, would have.
I have to agree with all of you. I think that, Rick and Lorraine and Linda, I think the messaging is so critical. And I talked with, in part of my outreach, I talked with a former client who has a very tiny nonprofit dealing with pets. And she said, "Oh, Lauren, because I asked her, what are you doing now for funding?" She said, "I couldn't dream of asking for money now." And I looked at her and I said, "Why? I mean, in these 8 weeks, have we not learned that our pets are very important parts of our lives? And I mean, it would be the perfect time for her to ask if the ask was put in the right way."
Great, great. So messaging, and I like what Rick said, now more than ever, right? I think we're all in agreement that why not now? This is it. This is the time to do it. So earlier we talked about the tax exempt code and why it's important. And it's important that we know because some may or may not be eligible for some SBA funding, like the Paycheck Protection Program. Here's a link just to the latest guidance in New Jersey, but that guidance and those terms seem to be fluid and changing from day to day. So I'm going to refer you back to each of your individual states for what's going on locally and where you can help your nonprofits. So Trusted Advisors Network, how can we help? How can we help the leaders of these organizations lead their organizations successfully through this? What should they be doing? What are the questions that we should be asking? And a lot of that came through what we were just saying. Any other ideas? What else should we be doing?
Well, some people on this call were on other calls that I've been on, and I talked about a webinar that we did in partnership with the Chamber. And it just so happened that we invited a lot of our past nonprofit clients to be on that webinar also. And the focus was resilient leadership, but the main focus of what we said during the webinar was that, you know, the first thing that you should do, we were talking about revising your business plan because obviously whatever you decided was going to happen this year is probably not going to happen this year. So in looking at that, one of the first things you should do for your organization is to do a SWOT analysis and decide what your strengths really are and your limitations and now what new opportunities and threats there might be. And I got quite a bit of feedback from some of my clients saying, "Thank you, I never thought of that," and that's really what we need to do first. You know, determine in this new environment, you know, hopefully your strengths will remain the same, and maybe your limitations have changed a little bit, but those opportunities and those threats have probably drastically changed. And so that's a good place to start. And then what do we do moving forward? You know, how do we negate those threats that we are now suddenly aware of that we didn't even think about before? And how does it affect our limitations, and how can we use our strengths to overcome some of that?
I think that's a real useful thing to do. And I would just add to that, in any kind of a meeting I have with anybody, I begin with what's up? What's the problem? What would you like to have better than you? However you ask it, it really is not going with a predetermined, this is what I think you need, but tell me what's up with you. And then as people begin to speak, you may determine, should you revise your annual plan because obviously things are different, and again, every business, every nonprofit is going to have a different issue that they're dealing with, and so it's beginning it with what problems are you having, or how can I help, and then just getting somebody to begin speaking, and then you go from there, which is no different than any other sales call that you would make with any other organization or human being. And that was what I might offer.
Right.
I think one thing, I mean, because most stuff with nonprofits is not that different from a for-profit. I mean, a lot of the questions, the plan, they have to have a good way of running the business they have. One difference in many nonprofits is the role of volunteers. And if the nonprofit is one that depends on volunteers to carry out their work, and it goes back to one of the first slides that you had up, Bertha, which is how can they remain top of mind with their volunteers and acknowledge all that work that the volunteers do, as well as focusing on the beneficiaries of who is it that needs to get whatever services they offer. But are there ways that they can be creative about now when they can't get together, they can't have events, they can't have, planning parties, whatever it is? How are they maintaining their presence to the people that are really critical in the longer term to carry out their mission? And I think that's really important.
One of the topics that's come up here and this is before the pandemic, but the pandemic has put a microscope on it, is I think the nonprofit community is ripe for consolidation. And so I think that's just something that, to Arnie's point, you listen first and you flush out what their goal is, why it's important, and what's holding them back. But I think that's a new dimension that is getting more airtime now. Is in the back of my mind, I wonder why we have 3 autism organizations here in our town that fundamentally all do the same thing. So, we've had a couple of mergers and acquisitions in the nonprofit space here locally as well. So I think that's maybe a dimension we don't necessarily either associate with nonprofits or maybe don't do a lot of that kind of work anyway. But I think it's something that is certainly getting more airtime as organizations look to stay relevant.
As a how-to, and as I was looking at one of your slides early on, Bertha, yes, chambers of commerce are nonprofits. When you say nonprofit, I'm thinking of I'm on the board of a fairly large nonprofit that deals with people, a sheltered workshop environment type thing, how to help other people. But for chambers, and Bertha and I were just on a call earlier today where a particular PR advertising agency is offering people the opportunity to using Zoom meeting rooms to as if you're going to an event and sitting at a table with 4 or 5 other people. And so you meet people in depth and then can follow up afterward. And I'm trying to get one of the chambers I'm involved with to offer this, just to keep them top of mind, acquire membership, acquire interest. And Bertha, I would think that, the Njabo would be another, New Jersey women-owned business would be another way to do this. It's relatively inexpensive. I think it's cheap. That Zoom is $15 a month, to have unlimited amount of people. And I'm trying to get another chamber I'm involved to do this. Now this PR advertising agency is doing it, and I think it's acquiring for them huge exposure. And I think, they charge $5 for somebody to sign up for one of these meetings. So in the short term, that they make a few $100, but the exposure is incredible. And I would think that organizations that are out there, just like Njabo or chambers, would be jumping on this. And I'm surprised that more haven't. So I just throw that out. Again, it's not useful for some of the other nonprofits that I've worked with, but the chamber kind of environment. Anybody wants to know more about that, call Bertha. She sat in on it. Call me, because I've been trying to get other people involved. It's a great venue. Anyway.
It is. Great. Any other thoughts, ideas?
You're muted, honey.
I wonder, when it comes to boards of directors, some nonprofits have boards of directors that sort of meet and they come and they listen and they go home. And then there's some that are more active. And I wonder if it isn't time to get the boards of directors in these nonprofits more deeply involved than they have been, because they're usually very influential people in the community, and know people who are also influential in the community. And I wonder if That should be a direction that nonprofits are looking to also.
Well, Bob, I would suggest that it depends on which side of the coin caused that condition. Because from the work that I've done, I see two different scenarios. I see a board that, while individually they're made up of great professionals, as a board they really don't understand what it is they're supposed to do.
Right.
And the executive director and CEO are frustrated because, you know, they almost feel like they're working two staffs. Then you have the other side of the coin where you've got such an overpowering personality sitting, maybe they're the founder of the organization that sits in the CEO or executive director seat. They don't want an overpowering board. They don't want the board to tell them what to do. So to me, it's a great question, because the boards, I've tried to get our local foundation to offer executive coaching for board chairs for a couple of years now. So there's just too much turnover to make it practical, I think. But nonetheless, I think it's a critical piece that you brought up. But those are the two scenarios I see that feed into that.
I would have to concur, Rick. I think that the other thing I think that is that now is if you have what you would, if you're the executive director and you have a board that is has been less than effective, it's such a perfect time to take a second look. Because of the financial strain, there will be certain board members who will not want to continue to serve. There will be other board members who are going to step up and over and far exceed what you expected them to do. And there are also people who are going to be coming forward when you do your fundraising efforts that you haven't ever gotten gifts from before. So it is a remarkable, could be a remarkable time of renewal for the boards. Sure. Certainly great opportunity for us.
If I could just jump in, this brings everything together. I used to work for BBC, which was non-profit, still is non-profit, but I was in the money-making arm. And I wrote $1 billion in sales for BBC, and do you still like the brand? I think the big misnomer, as we're all saying, is that there's a feeling about non-profit that there's something wrong with making a profit. And as we're saying, if you're not making money and not just fundraising, you're not achieving what your goal is. And I see many people, like many businesses, don't know what the goal is. It's a problem with leadership, and you mentioned it. There's somebody in charge who likes to be in charge, or there's a executive group who don't know what they're supposed to do. And I work on one nonprofit, and I'm actually coaching the head of how to manage people, because I say to her, if you don't ask me to do something, I don't know what to do. And if you don't give me your timeline and what good looks like, I don't know what to do in time and what it looks good. So I think this is something that we as a group can really make a difference. And I'm also part of Nonprofit New York, which is like the Amazon Web Services for nonprofits in New York. And there's a lot more talk about commercialization, monetizing, and people are starting to be aware. So this is perfect timing on our part to jump in and help people find out what they want to do, and if there's a joint venture to be had. Because like you say, why are there 3 nonprofits in one space where they're all falling at the same point, or some people exceeding here and some people are not exceeding here? It's building the team, because again, what is the goal? And if you've got a lazy board of directors, give them something to do and they'll soon run away, or they'll come up to speed. So I hope that makes sense in some way.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense, Amy, because one of the things that the nonprofit space is coming to grips with is this difference between the traditional charitable agency model and the social enterprise model.
Yep. You
know, you kind of hit on it as you were talking through it, and one of the key differences that I've seen with there's a couple that I work with that have embraced the social enterprise model completely, and that is, typical agencies tend to look at the people they serve as victims, whereas a social enterprise looks at the people that they serve as people of value. And, you know, it's just a different mental approach that they tend to take. So I think, once again, the opportunity presents itself to, as people are rethinking what the new reality is anyway, that maybe thinking about the social enterprise model, and that's something, again, once again, that we can influence just by being educated on what that might even look like.
Exactly.
But help them come out of this on the other side in one piece.
So again, I see that very much as you would with a team that wasn't working, or executive levels that working, or leadership isn't working. It's just doing the little gentle nudges. What's the purpose? Does everybody know? And I was in an event in January where there was somebody in a nonprofit who said, well, I don't mind that not everybody knows what our goal is. And I helped me understand why I'm having a heart attack listening to you say that. Who doesn't know what the goal is and what you're doing to help achieve the goal? So I think that time is right, as you're saying, Rick and Laura and Beth and everybody else. And it's not as hard as it is with anybody else, and it's not as easy as it is with anybody else. It's just stating, this is how we can help, because what's your goal? And if you're not enjoying it, what's your goal? And if you're not successful, what's your goal?
Yeah, I like that. It's doing well by doing good, right?
Yeah.
So these were some of the things I think that were consensus. I put a list together that I had sourced from online in terms of what we should be doing now to help leaders by emotional intelligence, right? It's common sense, but it's crucial for any leader to be fully aware of their staff. Many of you have commented on that, making sure that we're all on the same page and the same goal.
Yep.
Board leadership, right? This is the time for all those CEOs to ask their board members to join them as leaders in partnership with them, whether they're stepping down and we're filling in the roles, or stepping up to doing the work that's in front of them. Leadership assessment and development. This article said this may sound crazy, but it's a great time to focus on leadership. That's not crazy to us and to this group. We know that it's always a good time, especially now, to ask them what are the techniques and what are they doing for development. And creating maybe a tri-partnership. I think, Rick, you had mentioned that in terms of the actual nonprofits themselves, but the CEO, board, chief development officer team up now to help cultivate donors and dollars and engage folks. And how they can just continue to be an inspirational motivator. Motivate to get to the goal and get everyone on the same page. Everyone has to be informed of where they want to go. And right now, I like what you said, Linda, with the slot. You know, we have to look at, things have changed for all of us. So what is it that you're going to do different now in order to still meet your goal? And are your goals the same? So now more than ever, it's a time for every nonprofit leadership to demonstrate inspirational leadership.
Bertha, I think there's another part of the partnership conversation that we didn't really touch on, and that is foundations.
Mm-hmm.
You know, foundations are really becoming one of the key sources of grants and the like.
Yes.
And so the couple that I work with are ones that have grants specifically for executive leadership. I mean, and I got to tell you, it's you know, I don't do any work other than just coach. I don't decide, you know, who, you know, the foundation does all the work.
Uh-huh.
You know, they find them, they fund them, they, you know, screen them. I mean, the whole thing, all I got to do is show up and, hey, how many can you take this year? So I think that, but identifying them as being part of the partnership, I think helps a lot, because many of them will fund specifically what we do, because a lot of nonprofits can't afford it. You know, don't see it as something that's critical, even though, you know, we probably know that it is. But so I just haven't heard that mentioned yet. So I think that's worth, you know, putting down and exploring your local foundations one way or the other.
Excellent. Yes. Any other great thoughts? How can we help? Okay. Well, then I think that's all I had on my slide. Wendy?
Well, then I'd like to thank Bertha for spending her time with us. Were there any final thoughts or questions for Bertha or anyone else?
Just thank you so very much.
Excellent. Thank
Taking
you.
the time to put the slides together, the thoughts together, and share with us.
Thank you all.
And
Well
these
done, Bertha.
slides with the, I'm specifically interested in the surveys that you had on one slide. Will they be available through?
Yeah, yes, what we'll do is we'll put this recording as well as the slides up on the affiliate website. They should be up by tomorrow. Rick, if you need it sooner, I can go ahead and email them to you today.
If you don't mind, actually, I've got a couple of calls coming up that I think that would be helpful.
Yep, I can email that to you today.
Cool.
All right, thanks everybody, and thanks Bertha and Lauren.
Yeah, thanks.
Nice to
Thank
see
you
you all.
Well done.
Good job, Bertha.
Be well.
Thank you very much.
Bye.